everyone, so in our last video we had just gone back into the water after being in the yard and fixing our lifting keel. Once we had a working keel again, we were quite enthusiastic about going out and actually getting to test it. So we soon got quite a good opportunity to do that because our neighbour James was heading out to go cruising and he suggested that we come along. It just made us feel a lot less anxious to know that we would be going along with somebody else just in case, you know, something went wrong or anything like that. So quite excitingly we set out with no real schedule and no idea when we would actually be coming back. The plan was to head for Milford Haven in Pembrokeshire, which is a really nice natural harbour, and basically just to see what happened from there. So before we set out, I did quite a lot of provisioning because we didn't really know what the access to shops was going to be like because we were going to be in some quite rural areas. And while I did that, Nick was catching up on some last minute jobs that we needed to do before setting out.
Just wiring in the bilge pump. Not going to say anything too bad about the previous installation other than that it was being served by very flimsy speaker wire in a very dodgy way. Probably would have melted, so just putting some better wire in. We haven't got so much of this on camera, but we have been just doing some last minute wiring before we head off hopefully tomorrow. A bilge pump switch installed. You can switch it on permanently or have a momentary function. VHF. The boat came with an aerial on the push pet. It's not in great shape. Didn't really want to use it. Turns out the masthead aerial was just fine. We did some radio checks earlier, went to the other end of the marina, perfect reception, perfect transmission. There's a bit of a struggle to find a place to put the VHF. Our chart plotter goes here. We've got an old radar here. It still works, so we don't really want to remove it. Could have put it up there, not the greatest place. Couldn't really put it under there. The boat used to have like a behind bulkhead one where you just have a handset like a telephone that's blowing up at some point. Previous owners have thought, oh no, there's something wrong with the aerial, we'll put a new aerial in and all sorts, but actually the problem was with the VHF and not with the aerial. The boat did come with this VHF. It was installed down here. We've moved it up here. We've seen a lot of other Southerly 100s with the VHF installed in that position, and what we've been doing is running the cables behind the cabinetry. So this is all unscrewed. We pulled that out. The coax cable and the power cable run down there to their various destinations. So what we've got to do now is put it all back together. There's quite a lot of space behind the panelling, destined for running cables.
So when all of that was done, we set off in convoy with James. We left on a Saturday evening. And the idea was to do initially just a short hop over to a nearby anchorage and then the next day to go all the rest of the way to Dale in Milford Haven. So we left on the Saturday evening at I think about 7 p.m. Ideally we would have left a bit later because the tide was going to be against us, but obviously if we'd left it any later then we would have risked arriving in the dark, which we didn't really want to do, so we just had to accept that we were going to have to push the tide a little bit at first. was pretty uneventful. It was kind of lumpy out there, it was very grey and dingy. Not the nicest passage we've ever had, but it was okay, nothing terrible happened. So once we got in, we basically just made a hot drink, and then it was already after 10 o'clock by then, so we just went to bed. It was not particularly comfortable night's sleep. The anchorage was not massively rolly, but just, yeah, not particularly comfortable, and we were quite glad to be getting going again the next day. So we set off at high tide the next morning, which I think was about 10 o'clock, or maybe we set off a little bit before high tide. What we were hoping was that we would be able to catch the tide the whole way down, so we would have the tide going with us and have a nice easy passage down to Dale. Unfortunately, it didn't quite work out that way. So the passage started out pretty grey again, but after not too long the sun came out, which was really nice, and we also got a little bit of wind, so we were able to put the sails up, and that helped our speed. I think we were doing close to 8 knots at one point. Everything was going really well. Then we hit a patch of quite turbulent water, which I think was near the turbot bank. At around the same time, two other things happened. One, the wind died, so we were no longer able to get some extra speed from the sails. Two, the tide turned. So basically, when we were thinking about how long the passage was going to take, the mistake we made was assuming we would be able to keep up with James, but actually he has a much bigger engine than we do. We have a very small engine really for the size of the boat. Probably shouldn't have been too much of a surprise that we were not making progress as well as he was. So at one point our speed actually dropped all the way down to 2.5 knots, which was a little bit alarming because we still had quite a way to go, and we were also rolling around all over the place. The most annoying thing that happened was our fridge, which we keep at the end of the quarter berth normally, managed to fall off and come open, and it spilled sort of water and bits of like grapes and other things all over the floor and all over our shoes that were sitting down there on the floor. I was there trying to clean up all the mess while the boat was rolling around all over the place, which wasn't great. We cleaned it up and then put the fridge down in the saloon where there wasn't really space for it to move around. Not the worst thing that could have happened, but just a little bit annoying. As we kind of changed direction a bit to go towards Milford Haven, the tide started to be a little bit less against us, and we picked up some speed again, which was a big relief because we were starting to worry that we would be getting in really late. We arrived at Dale probably about 2 hours later than we had initially thought that we would. We had to navigate our way into Milford Haven, which we had been a little bit nervous about just because there's a lot of big ships and things that come up and down, but it turned out there weren't really any ships around, so it was relatively straightforward in the end. So we got in, put down the anchor, had a quick dinner, and then pretty much again we were just completely exhausted, so we just went to bed. The next day was a Monday, which unfortunately meant that I needed to do some work in the morning. I got that done, and then we headed to shore just to have a look around, a bit of an explore. Unfortunately, we were not able to stay in Dale for particularly long because the wind direction was changing, and so we needed to move on to a different anchorage. So in our next video we will be making our way upriver and exploring further up Milford Haven. If you enjoyed this video, please do like and subscribe so that you get to see the next one. Click the little bell icon if you'd like to get notifications when we post, and we will see you next time.